All right, Monday Fun Day. Welcome in as we are getting ready for a big week across the sports betting landscape. We've got not one, but two Monday night football games we're going to break down with Steve Merrill here on Wager Talk today. We got a big college football playoff is going to be by. We're going to talk about one of those big time playoffs up in CFB and actually game night in college basketball. Slate, but certainly an interesting game on the card here tonight. We're going to get Trig's thoughts on that. Our good friend Jesse Schule will be by as he'll talk some Monday Night Football props. Again, not one, but two games tonight on the card. And then, of course, Gianni The Greek with his weekly Steam report. He'll let you know everything that he is seeing early on this week, whether it be college football, college basketball, and, of course, the NFL and a little Monday Night Football. Prez, no idea. Last I heard, he was in a cabin somewhere wrestling a bear. It didn't work out in his favor, and here I am. So let's welcome in the one and only double R, 1L, Steve, I believe, Merrill, who is ready to roll on this Monday, Steve. And we got not one, but two Monday Night Football games that they're blessed with, and almost all of these teams suck on their own right. So why don't we start with the first game here, which is going to be the Bears and the Vikings, a game in which the Vikings already won game one, although I think by a field goal there. Game two, how does it go here tonight, do you think?
Well, the first thing, Joe, is if you like Chicago, you wait. Because Minnesota is a very public side, one of the most public sides this week. I talked about it in my Fade the Public video this past weekend. And this line is still holding 7 minus -05. So, normally you'd say, jump on Minnesota. It might go to 6.5. But I just don't see that happening. And I do think there's a chance some, more public books might hit that key number of 7.5 by kickoff tonight. Minnesota, a very public side. But once again, I don't like backing ugly dogs in the NFL. So the only way I'd be on Chicago is if you get a plus 7.5 or more. One of the reasons I say that is they looked horrendous last week in San Francisco. I saw a tweet last week that said if you got up at halftime to walk to your refrigerator, you had more total yardage than the Bears. And it actually is true. Chicago had 2 total yards in the first half at San Francisco last week, gave up 310. And then we saw the Niners not score a touchdown 4 days later on Thursday Night Football. So it's a tough back, but I do think that points to the under a little bit. That awful offense, I have no problem backing under 44. And some books have dropped to 43.5 here. I lean Chicago plus 7.5 or more if we ever get to that number, just because I'll fade the public. And by the way, fading the public does work better in December. Last week the public did not win a single play after going on a 36-18 run for 2 months. We talked about this on last call yesterday morning, Kelly Stewart and myself. So I do think the contrarian stuff works a little bit better this time of the year. So if you want to be contrarian, you're on the Bears, but only at 7.5 or more because it's pretty hard to make a case for them. I'd prefer to have the under 44.
So the Bears suck in a lot of different ways here, Merrill, but they are on a crazy losing streak. If you're worried about them not showing up or maybe sticking a fork in the season, I find that hard to believe with a division rival that they almost beat the first go-around, and it's a prime game. So I think Chicago's they're going to show up. The effort's going to be there. Whether or not it's good enough to win the game, you're not worried about Chicago just rolling over here, are you?
No, not at all. In fact, Kelly and I talked about this yesterday, with teams like the Jets. The Jets were on a 1-9 run, and they were laying a field goal on the road, and they cover. They win by 7. So, yeah, teams don't quit. The Jacksonville Jags, they get blown out 52-6 against Detroit a couple weeks ago, and they'd covered back-to-back games until yesterday, right? So NFL teams don't give up. They don't quit. The thing for me is that Chicago has no running game. You look at their last 6 ball games, they have run 78 rushing yards or less in 5 of those 6 games. Now, the one game was the exception, was Green Bay, but keep in mind, that's when they made the change at offensive coordinator. Thomas Brown came in. He's a running back, run-based attack against Green Bay. I think they just caught the Packers a little off guard. Brown, a couple weeks later, goes from being the interim offensive coordinator to the interim head coach. He was the OC at Carolina last year. That does not opinion. So I just don't trust the Chicago offense. I think the effort is there. I just don't think the ability is. And that's why, although they're an ugly underdog, I think the under probably is a safer play.
Yeah, and of course, key number, right? 7, Merrill, would you lean toward if we're under that key number, or anything 7 or above? What are you thinking?
Put it this way, Joe. I'm definitely not on Chicago at 6.5. That's probably the best answer, because you always have a preferred side in every game, right? But I'm not playing the side in this game. 7 is a key number. So, yes, at 7.5, I do start leaning Chicago because of the contrarian tilt. At 6.5, it'd be Minnesota or pass for me, but for me, that would be pass.
Yeah, and it's we'll see. It may never get back to that under 8 down here. We'll see what happens as we get closer to kickoff. Shout out to the chat. Those of you guys joining us live, Big Daddy in the house. We've got Have Cash, FB Coach, Eric Williams in there. And, of course, he does point out it is RR1L. That is CT. And some lunatic named Jesse Schule keeps popping up in these chat rooms. We'll see if we can figure out who that is. But in the meantime, Merrill, we do have a second game on the card here tonight involving they're going through it, the Falcons. Are they ever? Because they are taking on the Raiders on the road. Interesting non-movement line all week here, Merrill. Interesting. I mean, 5.5, and it's just not going. It's such a weird number, no?
Well, actually, Joe, we have seen a solo video for this game back on Friday. The 2 solo videos, the Sunday night games, by 11 was a miss this in that Niners game. We were 11-1. We're now 11-2 on the prime games. But this was 4.5 when I did the video on Friday. So it has moved a bit. Now, I will say the difference between 4 and 5.5 is pretty non-substantial. The difference between 5.5 and 6 becomes more substantial. This is a check the WagerTalk 5 odd. Now, the consensus line is 5.5 minus 15, and that's because DraftKings, Heritage, a sharp offshore book, have moved to 6. Those are sharper books, in my opinion. So I do like the Falcons in this game. Like them more at -4, obviously, when I posted the video over the weekend. But I think this move makes a lot of sense. First of all, Atlanta's off of 4 straight losses, as you mentioned. They're 0-4 straight up and against the spread. They have been pick'em or underdog in all 4 of those games. Pick'em against the Chargers. They played the Vikings. They played the Broncos. They were actually, a 3-point favorite against the Saints, the first loss. 3-point loss there. But they've been a dog in the last 3 games against Broncos, Chargers, and Vikings, 3 solid teams. This is a huge step down in class now against the Raiders, and Atlanta will not miss the opportunity. The other thing I like to point out is losses are often a little bit misleading in the NFL. Turnovers dictate everything. 7 turnovers to 1 the last 2 weeks. You can look pretty bad when you have a 7-1 negative turnover ratio. So I do think there's some upside with the Falcons here. Yes, the line is getting pricey, but if you're going to play it, I would lay it with Atlanta, and I would do it sooner than later, because it is 5.5 in some spots, but a lot of 6 is starting to show out there now.
So is this not the Desmond Ritter revenge game here, Merrill? Are you looking at the angle? Oh, God, he's awful. I mean, I don't care who he's playing for. He's awful. But it does appear to be Ritter, correct, here tonight?
Yeah, that's actually one of the reasons the line's gone higher, Joe, because, O'Connell was lit on Friday practice, and the line was 4. So that tells you how bad Ritter is that they're saying O'Connell's 1.5 better than he is. So that tells you all you need to know. I think they're both equally mediocre. So I don't like the fact the line's going to 5.5 or 6. I'd rather have it 4 and have O'Connell in there than 5.5, 6 with Ritter. I don't think there's a huge difference, but yet another reason why it's kind of hard to trust. I don't want to say the Raiders have quit, because once again, I don't think NFL teams quit for the most part. But let's keep in perspective 9 and very good football. Their was actually against Kansas City, which is weird. Just played down to their competition. Yeah, it was that game. By the way, the under in the game that was prime win. But if you look at the other losses, a 9-game losing streak right now, other than that Chiefs loss, their other losses have all come by 5 points or more. Most of the touchdowns. So here again, if you like the Raiders, maybe grab the 6, but I think you're better off playing the money line probably as you normally are with most underdogs. I don't like the Raiders here. I like the Falcons, especially at -5.5.
Kind of hard to even look. I mean, Raiders maybe even a team total under, somewhere along those lines. It's going to be hard to think that offense can get anything going Twitter. FB Coach 13 said, I'm going Atlanta, Minnesota, money line parlay. I don't even know what that would be, Merrill. Minus 120. What would we even be at with that right now? Do we know?
Yeah, I'm looking. I mean, they're minus 340, minus 275. I'm not a big parlay guy, so I haven't done the math on that. But yeah, I would think it's getting in near a pick 'em, right? I mean, basically,
Right.
Joe, it's kind of a two-team teaser, right? I mean, you're taking them both
That's
down
exactly
the touchdown.
Correct.
So you'd have to do the math there. Now, look, you don't want to tease a 5.5 or 6 point favorite down to pick Minnesota from down to 1. But what I will say is I haven't run the math on that, but if it isn't basically, minus 110, minus 120, you might want to consider the teaser option instead and do minus 1 pick them and get it down to minus 120. Is it
minus 139, Merrill? Minus 139. So, yeah, you can get minus 120 on a teaser.
Teaser might be better in that spot. Yeah, a pick them one teaser minus 1 be a better option. Thank you, Dan Alexander. In the studio running the math.
Yes. Dan, make sure you tell the people, Dan, when you get a chance, just turn that mic on. The Prez isn't here. Nobody wants to listen to him anyway. Merrill, what do you got going on here in that Wager Talk? As it's a big week coming up, man. I mean, a week before the holiday, we got college football playoffs coming up, ton of college hoops, NBA. What do you got locked and loaded here tonight for us?
Dan's math skills are so sharp is because his Eagles won by 14 yesterday. And I pointed out in my Fade the Public video that the Steelers were the most public all season. I pointed it out here on Wager Talk. Last call at noon Eastern Sundays, 11 a.m. on Saturdays. And by the way, it was a good day for my clients. I didn't even use the Eagles as a client play. It was one of my last cuts. We cashed our free play. I put up a team total yesterday at 3-0 sweep in the NFL yesterday on 9-0 sweep the last 2 Sundays for my client on Best Bet Talk. Hey, if you're not on board for December, shame on you. The first 10 months this year, we had doubled our bankroll, and then we were down 11 games in November. Everyone thought the sky was falling. We're still up over 100 units this year, and I'm 9-0 the last 2 Sundays here in December. Maybe not a bad time to get on board. We've got a bowl game posted for this week already. NFL Monday night play tonight. My strongest best bet for tonight up, and also daily basketball. Try out 10 days and nights for just $99. 1 day remaining on this special offer. It's 7 days, get 3 more free. 10 days, all sports, all access for just $99. No promo code needed. Steve Merrill, WagerTalk.com, and get there quicker with that shortcut screen, WT.buzz/SM.
Double R, 1L, Steve Merrill. Always a pleasure. Get the hell out of here on a Monday. We'll talk more about Monday Night Football coming up in just a few. Jesse Schule, I'm wondering if it's related to the same Jesse Schule who's invading the chat room. We'll have to find out, but he's got your props set up here tonight, guys. So make sure you hit that like button. Make sure you hit the subscribe button if you haven't done so. And don't forget to follow us there on IG as well as TikTok. Shout out to you guys hanging with us on this Monday. Fortnite in the house. Always a pleasure seeing him, as well as FB Coach and Titan CT and Gianni Detroit. Yes, Johnny. See what I do? Even I work on my birthday when the Prez can't show up. Shocker here. All right. So we have one Adam Trigger coming up here because why? Well, we got college football, we got college basketball, and we're also going to come up a little bit later, talk to our man VR, Gianni The Greek, who's going to have all the steam for you guys on what he's seeing early this week in college football, maybe a little college basketball. But we got to start with one of these playoff games, Trig, because the Penn State game is turning out to be pretty interesting, and I've heard both sides and making cases on both sides in this game. How are you looking at it?
Yeah, I like Penn State here. So, I mean, this is the first time we're seeing a playoff where you've got a home field advantage. So, obviously, I guess you could take that with a grain of salt a little bit because we haven't seen it before. But at the same time, I almost think that the books, in this case, aren't giving Penn State enough credit for home. Joe, there's miserable, and then there's being in Central Pennsylvania in December. And I think that's what SMU is going to experience on Saturday when the temperature is about 20 degrees. And it's 20 degrees and there's wind. I've been to Penn State games plenty in November and late. It's just, despite being in the ACC, They didn't have to come up here in their first year in the ACC. They didn't have to play at BC. They didn't have to play at Pitt. They actually had pretty mild weather for all of their road games. You know, they went over to Virginia, to Duke. Have anything like 20 degrees in central PA, and I think it matters. And I give them a bigger home court, or home, in college basketball, I'm calling it home court, home field than the books are here. I have this in the 11 to 12 range, and right now you're still getting 10, and you're still getting 8.5, which I think is a pretty good bet on Penn State. Now, these teams are similar in the respect, Joe, that I think they're both pretty consistent run and pass. They're both pretty good on both sides of the ball. When you look at the numbers, if you threw this game on a neutral field in like Glendale, Arizona or something, I think you could make a case that like they're two similar teams. But the difference to me is I've watched a ton of ACC football this year. It's the majority of what I watch. I go to ACC games, when I go to Syracuse games, and it just the quality of football in the ACC this year, in my opinion, did not match the Big Ten. And I think it's something of an eye test thing that you could see watching these two teams play simultaneously on Championship Saturday. If you had the SMU Clemson game on and the Penn State Oregon game on, in my opinion, both these teams lost. There was no question who the more impressive team was, and that was Penn State. And then you talk about SMU and all these unbalanced schedules. They didn't have to play Miami. They didn't have to play Syracuse. We saw them play Clemson, lost by Clemson, started to off the gas and try to just, run the clock out. And SMU almost came back and won the game. But in my opinion, they should have lost by more. They should have lost to Duke as an 11-point favorite. So, you want to give them credit for beating Louisville and Pitt. Those are two teams that faded down the stretch. That's what it comes down to for me, Joe. Penn State's just a better team. They played in a better conference. And I think if you've watched these two teams this year, it's clear as day. Add in the fact that SMU is going to have to go play in a sold out or a crazy crowd in Happy Valley and a 20-degree kickoff, probably 19, 20, 21 degrees at kickoff on Saturday. I don't see how they hang around here. I think Penn State rolls.
So, and it's class really handicap, right? We talk about class in horse racing a lot, Trig, and some horses just have always faced tougher competition, and they're being outclassed here. We also saw Cade Klubnik, who I don't think is great, but we did watch him throw for 262 and 4 touchdowns against this SMU secondary. Drew Allar should have just as much success, if not more, no?
Joe, the ACC shouldn't have two teams in this field. I know that people didn't want to put Bama in. It's ridiculous. This is a bad conference. There was a lot of bad football played in the ACC this year. Like, if you get through, go to teams 7 through 17, it was a lot of bad football. And that's where I just think that, SMU catching, the easier schedule in this conference, I just don't think they're on the – yeah, I don't think they're in the same class as Penn State, and I would lay the 8.5. I think they could pull away in this one.
All right, love it. Big shout out to Mike Concho 3 hanging out in the chat room. Good to see you. Also, Chris Sinclair there, as well as Garrick Williams. Appreciate that, guys. Star Child back in the house. Anthony Marquez. Don't forget to hit that like button, guys, if you haven't done so already. So we move on from college football, Trig, to a little college basketball. Not the greatest slate here tonight. It was a great weekend filled with some really good games. But we'll have hit or miss nights like this, obviously, over the next couple of weeks as we end the year. But one that piqued the interest here was Air Force getting ready to take on Northern Colorado. Neither team having the kind of season they thought they would to this point, Trig. But what are you thinking we're getting here tonight?
Yeah, Joe, I wanted to come on and talk about this game for a couple of reasons. One, I have a handicap for this game, but two, I think Air Force is a team that you have to start to buy against the number, of course, as we get into Mountain West play. The reason for that, their season got blown up 6 minutes into the season. Bo Becker, ankle injury, literally 6 minutes into their first game against Northern Alabama. It has ruined their season to this point. Why is that? Because Bo Becker is the catalyst for the Princeton offense that Joe Scott wants to run. And they also obviously lost, Rightus Petritis is like the most impossible name to say. Now at Cal, Becker was kind of the other guy that did what he did last year. So it was always going to be a huge ask for Becker to kind of step in and take that role on, which I think he's capable of doing. He goes down, and they've really had to figure out, who's going to play that position. And there's been serious growing pains, and you can see it in the results through 10 games this year, Joe. I mean, some really ugly loss to Wright State, Miami of Ohio. Like, there's some bad losses in there. Northern Alabama beat them, Sacramento State. And it's, in my opinion, entirely a result of losing, having that sort of that big to set up the Princeton offense the way they want to run it. Now, I think there's a couple. One, I do think Bo Becker is going to come back soon. I don't know if it's going to be tonight, but about 3 weeks ago on the Air Force broadcast, they said a mid-December return was what they were targeting. Now, I've heard nothing since, but maybe he popped. They've had a week since their last game. Who knows? Maybe he pops up here. If he does, he's probably coming off of the bench, similar to what they did with Petritis when he came back from an injury last year. But the other thing is the emergence of Caleb Walker, someone that, is now basically a starter that didn't at all for them last year. And that's because they have so many guys back from last year's team, Joe. This is like the only team, one of the only teams in the country that has everyone back. They didn't bring in any training. It's right as you train. So I think 10 games in, you have to start to think that they've figured out how to, life without Becker is the norm now, right? And I don't think you can keep penalizing them for him not being there. The second thing is Caleb Walker is now really starting to fill that role. He's 6'9", so he gives them that size on the inside. They're figuring out how to space the floor. You could see it in the win over Stony Brook last week. And so I think this team is only going to trend up. So when it comes to betting tonight, I disagree with the move. Looking at this and saying, well, Northern Colorado's lost 3 straight games, so they've got to win here. They've betted up from 7.5 to 9.5. Disagree with that. So it is a strong lean for me. Air Force plus 9.5. If I were to somehow find out Becker was playing, I would 100% bet Air Force and add it to my client card. If you see him pop up in this game, whether he comes off the bench or he's in the starting lineup, I think you can bet Air Force live right away as long as you're getting the right number. He's that important to this team, and I think he's going to be back soon. So keep an eye on Bo Becker and Air Force, because once he's back, this team is going to start for numbers left and right.
Yeah, it's interesting because the money has all been towards Northern Colorado, but the total seems to be ticking down as well. If you like Air Force, we don't want down the court there, Trig. They're going to want to play in a lower scoring game, and that might very well make that 9.5 and an under a pretty good correlated situation.
I mean, Air Force is playing with as few of, they want as few of possessions as any team in the country. Yep. They want to run 30 seconds off the shot clock, and they want to eliminate possession. So yeah, if Air Force is playing the game that they want to play, and it's going to be an under type team, because you're just not going to get the possessions. And then one other thing I wanted to mention here, Joe, Ethan Taylor is as good of a guard as you're going to find at this in the Mountain West. If we're talking individual ability, he's an absolute stud. He can keep a team in a game against a Big Sky team. That's the other thing I think we're losing here. This is Northern Colorado is a good mid-major team, right? This isn't Boise State. You're catching 9.5 with Air Force. Ethan Taylor on his own maybe can keep you in that game. And if the offense starts to finally run like it's supposed to, they'll probably win. I mean, I don't rule out an Air Force win here, but at worst, 9.5 is just a huge number for Northern Colorado to lay to a team that I think is improving.
I'm with you there. That game coming up 8 o'clock Eastern time here tonight. And Trig, of course, a lot of big games coming up, college basketball and college football. What's locked and loaded here on your Monday card for folks?
Yeah, so it's a light slate, but there's a game tonight that I've had for about a week. It's a college basketball play. I'm 7-1 in my last 8 5%ers, so the max bets have been going well. Got one easily yesterday with the Bucks +3. Never really in doubt there. So that goes tonight. College basketball 5%. It's the only one I have up, but I will post my new show on the clock, daily college basketball picks. That should be up in a minute, and I will post that under the free pick section. I think I gave out like 4 different free pick angles there, so check that out as well.
Awesome, Trigger. I get out of here on this Monday. Cash those tickets as we get ready, of course, for Monday Night Football. We talked earlier with Steve Merrill on his thoughts on sides and totals. We're going to talk some props here in a second. And then, of course, we'll end it with our man VR and Gianni, who will bring the steam for you guys, get you caught up with everything you need to know about where the money is flowing early in the week, and especially in these Monday night, maybe college football playoff games coming up. But let's bring in our man, Jesse Schule, ready to talk some props here on these Monday night football games. And Jesse, it's crazy. There's a dude in the chat with your name also just all over the map. Thank goodness you're here live and in person, and maybe that Jesse Schule will not show up in the chat. Shout out, by the way, to Bill Sandoval and company there. Appreciate you guys. But let's start talking about some of these props in game one. All of these teams have got crazy warts and issues here. Minnesota and Chicago to start with that one. It feels like there's a couple of easy ones you should probably always look at when it comes to Minnesota. But how are you approaching this one tonight? Mm.
4 yards against Minnesota last week, and we all know Kirk Cousins hasn't been at his best. We'll talk about that later. But Caleb Williams, he threw for 134 yards on 17 of 23 at San Francisco. But that's a different monster, a different defense, a different field, an outdoor game. Now he's coming indoors to face a Minnesota team that he threw for 340 yards and a pair of touchdowns against just last month in Chicago. As I said, just the matchup-wise, Minnesota struggling against the pass, and the game script calling for Chicago to be trailing for the majority of this game. And as Steve mentioned, Chicago doesn't have much of a running game, so it's not like they're going to come out there and try and pound the rock. I like the chances of Caleb Williams going over the number of 222.5.
All right, just to recap there, because somebody forgot to hit your button, audio on there in the chat room has just been, and that's definitely on you, Dan, and just take ownership of that, Dan. Yes, Dan is happy enough to throw in it's on him. So, Jesse, let me just recap, if I could, in case you missed what he had to say. There you go. That's exactly what he had to say. It was all about, Jesse, and tell me if I'm wrong here. You opened up that breakdown by saying nobody woke up. You were thinking this morning about having to play Chicago and Caleb Williams, and yet it sounds like that's exactly where you ended up going with it. Preview it one more time for those guys that didn't get a chance to hear it. Because of Dan,
yeah, I mean,
by the way. Throwing that out.
All right. Well, you look at this Minnesota team; they're a 7-point favorite, and they've got an excellent defense. Everybody's going to think this is a great defense, but they're great against the run. I think they're the best team in the NFL against the run. They rank 28th in passing yards against. They're giving up 251 yards per game in the air. These teams played last month in Chicago. Williams threw for 340 yards, a pair of touchdowns on 32 of 47. Passing in a 30-27 overtime loss. Williams struggled last week in San Francisco, threw for 134 yards on 7 but an outdoor game, again, completely different. Better indoors to face an opponent that he has had success against. Like I say, Minnesota is they're fine giving up yards in the air. The game script calls for Chicago to be trailing for the majority of the game. And as Steve mentioned, Chicago can't run the ball. So expect Caleb Williams to come out, sling it around the yard. I do, and if anybody's going to point out the offensive line injuries, I will acknowledge Chicago does offensive line, but the 28th ranked pass defense might not be the best unit to take advantage of that. So I still like this low over on the low number of 222.5 for Caleb Williams.
So let me ask you this then: if you're liking Caleb Williams, and I believe it was brought up in the chat room too, are you leaning towards the over? It seems to be a bunch of guys in the chat room are looking like the over in this one tonight. And if Caleb Williams is going to have any success, Jesse, then we're probably getting some points in this one. No, I mean, what we get 30-27 the first go around.
Yeah, when I bet passing yards, I don't think that way, Joe. For example, Cousins throws for 344 yards last week and they lose by 20. Just point. Because you're getting the yards doesn't mean you're getting the points. So, 44 looks about right to me. I wouldn't be in love with the over here. And 222.5, again, you see quarterbacks throw for 225 yards and the game doesn't necessarily have to be a high score. So those two things just don't correlate to me, to answer your question.
Interesting. All right, good stuff there. We also have a second game on board with Atlanta, who they're not going to lose every game the rest of the way, Jesse. Like, you got Desmond Ridder under center for the Raiders. I'm going to assume we're not talking about Raider props here, although you threw me for a loop with Caleb Williams. So are we going Desmond Ridder revenge props? What are we doing here?
I think the only guy who's going to make people taste that puke in their mouth taste more than Desmond Ridder is Kirk Cousins. And I'm not going to make any friends in the chat telling people to bet on Kirk Cousins. He's thrown 8 picks in his last 4 games. I mean, he's on an all-time terrible run of form. But I just wanted to point out, a lot of guys go through this. They have a stretch where they can't seem to get anything right. They throw a ton of picks. And in fact, there's another guy that had a similar, not quite a similar stretch, but there's a guy who everybody knows well who threw 7 picks in a 4-game stretch this season. And his name happens to be Patrick Mahomes. And he's certainly righted the ship. And other than the injury, he's looking a lot better these days. But in addition to that, you look at the top 5 passers in the NFL these days. You see names like Jared Goff, Baker Mayfield, Sam Darnold, and Geno Smith. And they've all had stretches in their careers where they're throwing a lot more picks than touchdowns. They managed to get through it. They're all having career years this year. I think Cousins will right the ship eventually. It's hard to predict exactly when that's going to be, but you can't ask for a better matchup than a Raiders team that's lost 9 straight with their best defensive player, Max Crosby, out for the year after having surgery. The Raiders ranked 27th in opponent touchdowns, passing touchdowns per game. I like Kirk Cousins to go over 1.5 passing touchdowns in this game. And yeah, like I said, nobody wants to bet on Kirk Cousins, but perhaps that's the best time to get on a guy is when nobody else wants to touch him. So Cousins over 1.5 touchdowns.
I love it. I saw his passing prop 237.5, I think is what it was, 238.5. We know that the Raiders, by my numbers, have allowed at least 242 yards or more in 6 straight games to quarterbacks, and they haven't exactly been the greatest of quarterbacks. I don't know you're going to be handing the ball off all that much, but I know a lot of folks have been asking about Bijan. I mean, listen, getting 240 yards from Kirk Cousins shouldn't be an issue, all things being considered against who he's playing. If you like him over 1.5 TDs, does that correlate to an over on the passing prop?
So the reason I went with TDs and rather than passing yards is I'm a little bit concerned with Ridder getting the start for the Raiders. They could be dealing with a lot of short fields, a lot of turnovers. They go up early and shut it down. There's really no need to air the ball out anymore. And that's where my concern is. I don't like betting on guys to get passing yards in situations where their team doesn't have to pass. And if Ritter has a bad game, they're not going to need to do too much. They're going to have an opportunity to slow it down and just shut the game down in the second half. So that was my concern for the passing yards and why I went with the touchdowns instead.
I did see some questions coming in here about Bijan Robinson here, maybe a anytime touchdown kind of situation here. I mean, if we're going to get Cousins to throw a couple in the end zone and maybe Bijan scores a couple, man, does it feel like a Minnesota team total is going over here tonight. Any feel he'd be utilized? Is he worth a shot at an anytime touchdown?
Minnesota Atlanta jersey, but the Atlanta team total over might not be a bad idea. And Bijan, if you get
good point.
If you get a decent price, I'd be all in for a Bijan touchdown, just depending on the price. The reason I went with Cousins is because I feel like nobody else wants to touch him, and that gives us an opportunity to get a better price on him.
Yeah, forgive me. I drank enough bourbon for my birthday weekend to kill a small cow, Jesse. So I'm still thinking I smell like the bottom of the bottle. But always a pleasure, and thanks for correcting that for me here. Now you've got, in addition to NFL, all year long, you've been with me on the college football kickoff show as well, and we've got some monster playoff games coming up here. It should be a lot of fun this bowl season as well. What do you have? Locked, loaded, ready to go here and for the rest of the week?
Yeah, you mentioned I got a 5% bowl game up for sale right now on my page. But tonight I got a 4% college basketball, won 5 straight with college hoops, and 20-6 with my last 26 college hoops. That's dating back to last year's tournament. So on a pretty good run with college hoops. I'm up 100 units in 2024 with college and NBA combined. So doing pretty well with both college and pro basketball. And I got a 3-pack tonight. I got NFL, college hoops, and NBA. So the best bets probably just get all 3 for $29.
That is the way to roll. Not to mention partnering up with Jesse or any of your favorite handicappers. I believe final opportunity all access bowl package for one as well. If it's college football you like, get ready. Starting this week, there's a whole lot of college football coming up. I think is going to be great. And for $149, hopping on board with your favorite handicapper is the way to go here at WagerTalk. Jesse, always a pleasure, brother. Thanks for hanging out with us here. Don't forget to smash that like button. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't done so already. What are you waiting for? Also, the follow button would be much appreciated on IG as well as TikTok, because we saved the best for last. We got our man, VR, to talk a little steam here as early in the week, Monday, fun day. Gianni, coming off a monster weekend for you, pal. Congratulations once again. And I know there's going to be a lot of people focusing their attention on, we got 2 games tonight, but we got playoff college football coming up. So what have you been seeing early on here on a Monday?
Yeah, coming off a really hot couple weeks now. And I said, we're changing it up. 1-1, you're going to see the low volume. I've been planning this for a long time. And after 10 years of documented results, 8 winning years, it's time to switch it up a little bit. So really excited and already starting to see the results. Here's what we got so far looking at tonight's game. The money's coming in on the favorites. But rest assured, most of it is public money. Because here's what's happened with that game. Like the Minnesota side, like if you look at the opening number, right, it was 5.5 was the look ahead. They brought it out 5.5, got the 7. Since then, it's been just public betting it. None of the sharp guys are laying the points with Minnesota. If anything, I'm surprised no one's taken the 7 yet. And I just think it's because the risk is going to continue to grow. And as the bettors start teasing Minnesota, and the risk, again, continues to grow for the books, I think they're going to force to give us an even better number on the Chicago Bears. Again, I'm not excited to bet the Bears in this position, but there's absolutely no reason to lay this kind of chalk with Minnesota. I mean, we already have history with between these two. They played just less than a couple weeks ago, and we know what the line was. It was in Chicago, and Minnesota was a 3-point favorite. Now, you do the math, and recency bias, and I understand why it's so high, but it's just not justified even if you factor in that previous game and coupled with the result of that previous game. Again, Minnesota's coming in on fire, but I think the books have done a really good job of pricing this Minnesota team, because even though they're, over the last 10 games, they've won 8 of them, against the spread, they're a 500 team. So that's a perfect example of the market correcting itself. I don't think there's any value left in Minnesota. If you laid the 5.5, you made a good bet because it's on a key number of 7 right now. But I couldn't lay it right now. For right now, I think it's Bears or pass situation. Atlanta and the Raiders, here's the bottom line. It's really hard, and I'm seeing guys that I respect having trouble quantifying this as well, because you talked about Desmond Ridder coming in. We don't have any history of him. Here's the bottom line. He's got 51 pass attempts this year. So you're going to have to project out what you expect from him. We don't have enough history. The only thing we have is what he did with Atlanta last year, and he had about a 41% success rate. That's a little below NFL average. So it's what do you expect from him? Is he going to still be around that NFL average, a little below, a little above? That's what makes this one so difficult to quantify, and more importantly, come up with what the true line should be. That's why I think you haven't seen too much movement, even though it's been nothing but public money on the Atlanta side. Because you got to remember, Joe, the money comes in late. So this game that was like 4.5 just 2 days ago, now at 6, I still think this has room to run. Like, I think if you like the dog, you could sit back. I still think you're not going to get nothing but favorite money tonight. I don't think you're going to see too many bettors looking to bet these underdogs. So if you like the dog, sit back. You're probably going to get a better price. If you like the favorite, I don't know. To me, I think that it's gone. Like, knowing that I could have got 3.5, 4 on Atlanta, why would you lay 5.5, 6 today? You're not betting from any position of strength. So for me, it's dog or pass in both. Again, it's not being contrarian. It's just that the lines move too much.
Yeah. I'm seeing some guys in the chat, and I do this often too as well. Listen, if you don't like the number, then watch it live, Gianni, and hopefully the Raiders get a quick score. And if you want to get a better number on Atlanta, go ahead and get the better number on Atlanta, because stranger things have happened. We've seen it. But that number hovering around 5.5, it's such a dead number, is it not?
Yep. Yeah, it means nothing. That's why I'm saying it has room to run, Joe. They're waiting to see what risk they're actually going to have, and where do we have to take this? Do we need for the sharp bettors to come in and limit some of this risk? Then we're probably going to have to hang a 6 or better up there. Or are we comfortable with this position? Because I'll tell you what, about 30 minutes before now, starting to get interested in the Raiders side.
Yep.
There's no reason at all it should be around 5.5. Like, to me, that's going to be a sign team. They've done absolutely nothing. They've lost 9 straight games. Like, the spread's the great equalizer, and it hasn't been equalizing nothing for them. Like, no matter how many points you give them, it just hasn't been enough. So, like, what's attractive? But then you look at the Atlanta side, I'm going to lay points with a team that hasn't won since November 3rd. Like, am I excited to do that? And on the road, no less? So these are just ugly game, ugly game. And in that case, I'm usually looking at the dog or leave it alone. But more importantly, Joe, here's what the best takeaway for this tonight. The strongest edge that we have as bettors is the ability to pass. And we don't take advantage of that enough. We have to lay 11 to 10 every bet we place. That means you pay an admission price. Every bet you place, whether you like it or not, you're paying an admission. So you better make sure you want to be there to place that bet. Otherwise, sit back and wait for the best positions. The book has to put up a price. They have to book it, or else you're going to go across the street because they're booking it. But we as bettors, we don't have to. We could sit back and wait for the biggest mistakes. So if you feel like you're guessing, if it doesn't jump off the board at you and then confirmed by what the market's doing, you don't have to bet it. That's the disconnect that most recreational bettors can't separate themselves from. Being fans and being bettors. Do it for entertainment, have fun, bet, and know you're going to lose money long term. But if you're actually using sports betting as an investment vehicle and you're putting in your hard-earned money, then you got to be willing to pass. You got to be willing to conclude that the lines move too much. I can't take a bad number. Like, those are things you know what you're doing. You bet long enough. You watch Wager Talk Today. Most of the guys that are listening to me know this shit already. Excuse me. They're sharp enough.
Yep.
Like, you're not here by accident. You know when you're doing right things. You know when you're doing wrong things. If you're laying Atlanta at 6 or higher, you're doing it's a bad bet. If you're laying 7 on Minnesota, it's a bad bet. And bad bets win all the time. I'm not telling you they're going to lose, but get in the habit of placing those, and it's not going to turn out well for you.
So, real quick before we get you out of here, Gianni, how about the college football playoffs? Have you seen anything, any crazy movement? Is that, you thinking, going to come very late before kickoff as well?
Yeah, a couple bowl games that they got out ahead of. You saw a couple moves. Talked about them throughout the week. But big bets, because the limits get so big and the public money is so significant that they actually more or less the books have to reflect it, that bias. So these betting studios know they don't have to rush. And that's, you'll see the playoff money from them will come in later in the week. We've been picking off a couple bowls, actually sent out 3 premium plays already. One, the ball pass, the balls it's been stealing the last year before that, year before that, year before that. It's like double-digit ROI every single year, and nothing's going to change. But the playoffs, I haven't seen anything, nothing in the accounts yet. No markets. I haven't seen much movement at all. Like Penn State's still sitting a little bit. Like, you've seen a little bit movement on the totals, but I haven't seen nothing on the sides at all so far. Just college basketball.
Are you seeing anything college? Yeah, I was going to say, college basketball steam coming in early.
Yeah, so far 2 sides, 2 totals. I'm always more comfortable with the sides, because the totals, what you want to look at is you want to pay attention is how has the line moved? Does this appear to be a comeback on a middle or a little later in the day? Like, if you missed it, for example, I'm giving you 874 under 147 Cal Baptist versus MTST. So the bottom line here is under 147. Now, if it's sitting at 145, it opened like 148 and it's moving down, and you look at 145 now. So you're obviously not going to go under 145. But the key is look later in the day. What is that line doing? If it starts moving up and really moving up, then you know that early money was simply a setup for when the limits increase to get a better number later. Just look at what that line's going to do. If it continues to move in that direction, then you already know that's probably the right side, but I missed it. And I know now not to go against it, but I missed that move. And it lets you pass and not lose money. So pay attention to there's 2 totals, 874 under 147, 876 under 146, Grand Canyon, La Tech. 2 sides as well, 871 Wofford plus 7.5 and 7. And 881 Oral Roberts plus 27.5 and 27. So it's a kind of slow day, which is good, because it seems like everybody's setting up and looking through all the bowl games and the playoffs like you touched on. And I think over the next couple of days, you're going to start seeing a lot of action on those. I'll be here every single morning to share as much as possible. So every day you're going to be getting college basketball steam, and the NBA steam, NHL, soccer, player props, NFL, all that stuff. Every single morning, Wager Talk Today. Smash that like button, though. And don't forget, comment. These guys are working hard to try to share good information.
Always the best, Gianni. It's going to be a hell of a week here, brother. We appreciate the time. And 24 hours from now, we will see you again. Be well. And there you got it, guys. Gianni The Greek. You can visit his page at Wager Talk right now. Take advantage if you want. Like he said, he's already got premium bowl games already posted to clients. You can grab that 149 package. Visit his page, wt.buzz/VR. Partner up with him. Never miss a bowl game or a college football playoff game right through the national championship, guys. Just 149. Take advantage of that deal. Why you still can. Want to thank all the guys, actually, for coming on here today. Want to thank the Prez for not being here. Always a pleasure. But also, Dan, I counted, 2 screw-ups? Was that it? I mean, I think you handled it pretty well there early on. You all right? Everything good?
Hand up. 2 screw-ups. Monday, the line was set at 2.5, so we still cashed the under, but we have a couple live shows to go, so it's still alive. The over is still alive, but we'll take the cash on the under here on Wager Talk Today.
Yeah, no, I definitely betting the over because we've got the opening line report coming up,
Thanks.
guys, in about 10
Thanks for the
minutes
confidence.
to the
Appreciate
over.
it.
I got
Thank
you
you.
back. Yeah, I believe in you. I also believe in cashing my tickets against you. Big Daddy, shout out to you guys. Dave Clark in the house, Anthony Marquez, Daryl Turner, always good. Hit the like button, guys. We'd appreciate it here. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button if you haven't done so. Take advantage of the opportunity to partner up with these guys. Shout out to Steve Merrill here today, Adam Trigger, Jesse Schule, plus his, I guess it's his twin brother in the chat room, Jesse Schule. Guy is, man, talk about a creeper. Unbelievable stuff, guys. We appreciate the time. Habe Cash, thank you for the birthday wishes, guys. All the best. We'll be back here again tomorrow. Likely, Dan will be here screwing up. I'll be in here pointing it out with you. So until then, cash those tickets, guys. Don't go anywhere, though. NFL opening line report, top of the hour. Get ready for it. We'll see you again tomorrow.